Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I am with the Great Lakes Whale Co. And today we have Teddy with us. And he's been working on a project, actually finalizing a project about surfboards around the Great Lakes. So I thought maybe Teddy, if you could do a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about your project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from Chicago. I live between Chicago and Michigan City, Indiana. And my name is Teddy, Theo, Theodore, Burdett. Any of those, or Dr. DeGennaro Dr. DeGennaro is another one of them. And I do a lot of different things. I'm an industrial designer. I'm a design educator and an entrepreneur. And one of the projects that I've got going on is a collaboration with a graphic design professor and a fellow surfer and coworker of mine called the Great Lakes Surfcraft. And we are documenting shaping of surfboards and surfcraft in the Great Lakes area, turning it into a book.
When we talk about shaping, what do we mean by shaping?
So shaping kind of encompasses the design of surfcraft and the building or making of surfcraft. Most surfboards are carved or shaped from a blank of foam. And before foam, it would have been a solid plank of wood. And a shaper takes into consideration what are the kind of waves a surfer is riding, what's the skill level and physiology of that surfer, and they incorporate all of their know-how about hydrodynamics and how a surfboard works in waves into a design. And so I think that surfboard makers, aren't called surfboard designers a lot because a lot of the things that they make are one-off, totally, in reaction to a locale or in reaction to, or taking into consideration the constraints of an individual surfer.
So most of the people you encounter, these are like unique boards that come out. They could probably try to simulate what they've done before, but won't be exactly the same.
Yeah, shapers utilize templates. So, they'll make like a two-dimensional template that they can trace onto one blank, one foam blank after another. But, in the hand building process, everything comes out different from one board to the next. So a shaper might have like a model, but they'll oftentimes like make small deviations from that model to customize it for somebody.
Makes sense. And then you kept saying something earlier you kept saying surfcraft. It's almost kind of like you were avoiding the word surfboard. Was that intentional?
It's intentional. Like what we wanted to do with this project was to see what people are making and to not necessarily confine or constrain our research to just surfboards, because there are a lot of different ways to ride a wave, and to ride a wave with just wave power and human power. And in fact, like one of the ways that a lot of people get into surfing is just through body surfing, which is just your body in a wave. It's not surfboard surfing, but it's still surfing. It's just you and the power of the wave, and you're riding it, with some intention, some directionality, and maybe doing some tricks. But boogie boarding, like actually lying down and using a board to plane on the wave and to carve into the wave and to do your maneuvers. That's something that a lot of people do on the lake. There's foil surfing. So there's just like a lot more ways that people surf than just surfboards. So yeah, that's why I use that term,
Right.
to leave it open.
Okay, that makes sense. It's a really cool idea. I like the idea of focusing specifically on the Great Lakes. How did you find the people?
Finding shapers around the Great Lakes is a little bit of a challenge because there's not really a well-established industry here. And a lot of the people who are doing surfboard shaping are doing it as a side hustle and doing it as a hobby. Like there are only a few people who are really doing it as a big full-time concerted business, concerted effort at a business. And so we had to do a lot of hunting on Instagram, and we put out calls on Facebook to see if people would respond. We found a lot of people through word of mouth, and I met people in the water, and they were, I was like, oh, what's that board? And they're like, oh, I made this board. Oh, cool. So it really was just through networking with surfers and trying to connect the dots in Facebook and Instagram.
Are most of them doing it on a professional basis? Or is it kind of like a hobby in between?
In between. I would say even in the surf capitals of the United States, from the articles that I read in Surfer's Journal and elsewhere, it's harder and harder to make a living as a shaper because you're competing with computer-controlled carving machines, popping out blank after blank.
Mass production.
You're competing. And low wage labor. I mean, most of the production surfboards that you find that aren't like your $200 Walmart or Sam's Club surfboard, a lot of them are coming out of Asian factories where the labor cost is so much lower than if you're trying to cover your overhead and pay yourself as a person living in America. Not to mention even paying yourself as a person living in the United States in a coastal city, right? So it's hard to make a living at it, and and I think there are even fewer Great Lakes surfers here to create demand for people who want to do it as a business. So the long answer I just gave you. The short answer is a few people are doing it professionally. A lot of people are doing it as a side hustle, but they're putting professional work into their boards.
And I see actually you have a couple boards behind you.
These boards are almost all from this project. What we did to conduct our research is we went out looking for shapers. We had to do that work of identifying who this network of people is, and then we went around and interviewed some of them. And the question that we asked when we were doing these interviews and visits to the shaping bay is there something unique about the Great Lakes that comes through in your designs? Do you have to make special design considerations for a board that you're shaping for the Great Lakes? And so we just thought that would be what we do. We ask people about what's different about Great Lakes surfboards because of the conditions. And what we found was that, the answer was kind of a simple, you got, it's good to have a little bit more volume. And maybe a little bit more volume under the chest for paddling since there's less buoyant water when it's fresh water. But not a whole lot. But what we found the opportunity was this sort of hidden thing. What would you like to try? Is there anything that you've thought would be really neat to try for a Great Lakes board, but that you haven't had a chance to? And pretty much everybody had an answer to that. Oh yeah, shortboarding on the Great Lakes, there's nothing really like developed for doing that well, and you know, the waves have so much less power, so like that's a big area, big opportunity area. It became apparent that like if we wanted people to answer a question about how they design for surfing in the Great Lakes, that the best way we could do that would be to commission boards and like actually poll on design and get stuff built, so that we could put it in the water and see, how does that surf differently from another craft. So that's what you're looking at here are almost a dozen boards that we commissioned from Great Lakes shapers, really from Lake Michigan shapers, to see what's different about how you make a board for the lakes and how they surf. With the absence of like a real surf industry in this region, people get their van together and drive to Florida to get blanks, to get foam blanks. You have to order everything. It's not like you can't walk down the street and go into a surfboard shaping factory and be like, oh, this is how it's done. I mean, of course we got YouTube and everything like that, but it sort of seemed like a lot of people were reaching for stuff from the garbage or from Home Depot or from like whatever barn supply place was close by as an alternative to like having a really big piece of foam shipped to you, which costs hundreds of dollars, to do. So I think that to some degree there was a hypothesis in going into this research that a lack of industry would lead to more difficult supply for the craft, and that the necessity of finding materials might be one of those instances of necessity being the mother of invention and leading to innovation or just different applications. So that was another reason for wanting to commission boards, to see what sort of experiments might emerge in terms of materials and techniques. So every board that's here and every board that's in the book is really being showcased as a process documentation. So every shaper took photos along the way of what they were doing, and we're like, that's the majority of the book is actually like looking at how these things were made.